Welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us for this month's webinar. My name is Corey Hesser, and I am one of the Senior Project Managers with Kirkwood Continued Education. Today, we are with Sarah Gorsh, who will be speaking about mastering productivity. Sarah began her unexpected journey into project management over 20 years ago when her bachelor's degree in leisure studies left her craving more purposeful and challenging work. She discovered her passion in the dynamic world of project management and never looked back. As a consultant and certified coach specializing in project management, process improvement, and leadership coaching, she thrives on helping clients bring order to their chaos. She leverages her extensive experience to coach individuals one-on-one, facilitate impactful workshops, and empower teams during transformative times. I don't think I pronounced that well. Sarah holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Iowa and an MBA from Nova Southeastern University's College of Business and Entrepreneurship. And I say we go ahead and get started. Sarah, I am going to hand it right on over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Corey. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I just quickly scrolled through the names of the folks on here today, and I recognize a few names. So hello to everyone who I've already met, and I'm happy to be quasi-meeting, I guess, everybody else who I haven't met yet. So again, like Corey said, my name is Sarah Gorsh, and today we're going to talk about mastering productivity and using agile strategies to work smarter and faster. So just a little bit about me. Like Corey said, I'm a business owner, consultant, and coach. My business is called High Torque Business Solutions. 25 years corporate experience in project management and operations. I'm a wife and mom of 2 teenagers. One just graduated, Lord help me. I'm an avid volunteer and therefore the founder of the Just Say No Club, which is a club of people who over volunteer, and it's a support group, and we meet, except we haven't met yet because we can't find time to meet because everyone's really busy. And it seems like maybe Tuesdays at 2 a.m. is the best time, but we're still trying to get confirmation on a meeting time for that. I am a self-diagnosed FOMO victim, which probably is a lot of the reason why the bullet before that is a problem that I have. I'm hopelessly and helplessly optimistic, which also kind of contributes to a productivity discussion that I'm about to have. And my business name is a little bit of a alignment with one of my passions, which is myself and my family. We are classic car fanatics. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So today's agenda will be as follows. I did mention I was a project manager for the last 25 years, right? Agendas are my jam. So to talk about productivity today, we're going to start with the part that no one honestly really likes to think about, and it's an F word, if that makes it even worse, failures. And I suspect that that's why most of us are here, including me. Specifically, we're going to talk about why do we fail and what stories do we tell ourselves about that failure, or worse yet, about ourselves when we fail. And then how do these stories, droning on unchecked, help us or hurt our ability to be successfully productive in the future? We're also going to talk about how, just maybe, we should try to think differently about productivity and how thinking about things differently can improve your success, even if you want to keep using the same tools and tricks you've always used. I'll be asking you to get inside your head a little bit, or a lot bit, maybe. That part's up to you. So in case you need to mentally prepare for that, consider this your warning. And finally, we will talk about Agile. So maybe we can see in the participant view here, I'm going to try to pull that up again because I somehow closed it. But so if you can raise your digital hand, perhaps. Raise your hand if you've had any experience with Agile at all in the past, just real quick. Okay, a few, all right. Okay, you can put your hands down. Now raise your hand if you have no idea what Agile is, which is probably the rest of you. Yep, there we go. All right. And there's probably a third category here, which is raising your hand if both questions I just asked, you have some experience with it and you have no idea what it is applies. And I'll raise my hand to that sometimes. Well, you're not alone. And let me say that even when you think you have it all figured out, like something changes and now you're just questioning life as you know it, perhaps. I'll do my best to keep it simple and hopefully draw some correlations for you that might help you with your future encounters with Agile and certainly, hopefully, with your productivity going forward. We will also do some reflection. I'm a big fan of reflection, which is different than dwelling. Let me just put that out there if you're doing it right. So we'll take some time to reflect and also talk about how reflection can be a huge factor in your success. And lastly, let's take some time to tie it all together at the end. And this is the point where you'll hopefully have noted some takeaways to consider implementing, or at a minimum, like at least consider some things to think about. And if at any point you have questions or comments, feel free to raise your digital hand, just like you did, or just go ahead and put them in the chat if you want to just put your question out there. Corey has graciously offered to help me by keeping an eye on the chat. And I welcome the interruptions for questions or comments, so don't be shy. So I guess maybe now's a good time to ask, are there any questions or comments? It's early, so no pressure. All right, well, we'll just get going. And if something pops into your head, feel free to put her in the chat. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a poll, 2 polls, in fact. So I know I said that we would do some reflection at the end, but we're also going to do it at the beginning because I'm a big fan, if I haven't mentioned that already. So let's go ahead and get our minds in the room, metaphorically speaking, with this poll. There's 2 here, and we're going to take them one at a time. Hopefully both will serve as a baseline for you as to how you're currently viewing and feeling about your productivity fails. So let's go ahead and do the first poll, Corey. She's going to put it in the chat there. And so the question is, what gets in the way of you feeling productive most often? And hopefully you should be able to select. If you can't select from the poll, let me know. Oh, here we go. I'm starting to see people popping in, and I'm going to put the results up here on the screen so we can all look at them. There we go. So these are just some common feelings, I guess, maybe that I've had sometimes when I've failed. Yep. This is pretty common, I would say. And interesting, not a ton of people are saying that they haven't found the right technique yet. So people, sounds like maybe have a technique that they use, but they don't necessarily attribute that to the reason, why they fail. So, which is awesome because that's actually one of the things we're going to talk a lot about. Prioritization issues, hard time distinguishing priorities. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, awesome. Very good. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so now our second question is, when you fail productively speaking, what best describes how you feel? And Corey's gonna throw the other link in the chat there for me. Thank you. And we're gonna jump to that one. I answered myself this question. What's the unhealthiest food in this house I can eat, and how much of it should I eat? Food is a solution, but probably not a good one. Yes. Oh, I love it. I'll try again tomorrow. Perfect. This is great. All right. Awesome. Oh my gosh. I love this group. I'll try again tomorrow. You guys don't need any of my help. But despite the fact that you feel like tomorrow's a new day and you're gonna try again, like still doesn't keep some of these things from making you feel a little like maybe you didn't do things right, right? So deep breather. Yes, deep breaths. That is a good one. Thanks, Tammy. All right. So very good. Thanks for going along on that with me. Just curious to kind of see where everyone's heads are at. So if any of them were like, if any of them are hard to answer, or it sounds like some of people didn't really resonate with anything that's in there, that's fine because we're all individuals and we all kind of have our own experience with this. It's and whatever you're feeling, that's totally understandable. I mean, this is hard stuff. So I appreciate y'all being vulnerable and putting your thoughts out there for the group to see. So already kind of talked a little bit about the end of that first poll that, it didn't seem like there were a lot of people who were having a tough time like you finding a technique to use, but y'all probably know that there's a gajillion productivity techniques out there, and it would probably be poor form of me not to mention some of them since this is a productivity discussion. These are some of the ones I just found with a quick Google search, and there's probably 10 times 10 of these out there. Some of these look a lot alike. Some of these are fun, have funny names. Some of them, like you don't really know what they are by the name that they're given, but these are all valid techniques. I've heard of most of these. Some of them I haven't. Some of them I've tried, but certainly not all of them. And my point in bringing all of this up was not to give you some leads to research regarding which technique might work best for you, which you're free to do if you want to do that. But it was to say that, there is no foolproof way to go about getting the most from yourself in terms of productivity. This is something that's very unique and personal to you, and we're going to talk about why that is. And of course, thanks to all the wonderfully brilliant people who've written books and produced content on these very frameworks to help us be more productive. For without them, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. So, failure, here it is, that first word, that first F word. The truth of the matter is, it's statistically impossible to escape failure. Like, it's just a fact. If you haven't felt some sort of failure when it comes to productivity or just really life in general, you might have to check with yourself to see if you're actually trying to do anything. Like statistically speaking, it's gonna happen. So we just talked about the popular techniques that one can use and to make sense of their to-do lists and to get things done. But here's the truth about why those techniques aren't the easy button. And your first takeaway of the day is if you tried one or more of these productivity hacks and failed, the reason isn't because you chose the wrong one. That probably you're not necessarily picking the wrong technique. Maybe you did, and if that happened and you picked another one and it worked, like awesome, congrats. That's amazing. But often you could try each one of those mentioned on that slide, and most likely none of them are going to fit the bill completely or for long term. And there's a host of reasons. We'll talk about those. I have an example. I have a friend that I've been helping with his mom and her house. She's living in her house. She's an octogenarian, and prior to now, I would have categorized her as like a hoarder in training, if you will. But now being in her house and helping to clean it, I realized that she has graduated into the professional world of hoarding with honors, if there is such a thing. And I don't say that to be like judgmental or bring levity to the situation, but like it's remarkable. To complicate matters, she now has a rodent problem, which is how my friend came to get involved because now it's a health issue. It's not just a preference on how someone wants to live. So as we're making our way through piles of things in her house, I bet I found at least 2 dozen items that his mother had purchased to help her with her hoarding, either like sort it out and get rid of it, or like better organize it, like racks for shoes, hanger triangles, how-to books, gallons of cleaning supplies yet to be opened. It was, I mean, it was amazing, remarkable. And so I tell you this to illustrate the point that it really doesn't matter what technique or tool you want to use. If you're not motivated to complete the task, it's not happening. The only thing that this woman had done was add more things to her mess to deal with the hanger triangles and the books and the racks of shoes and that sort of thing. She was completely avoiding the true root cause of her problem. So that when I found or when I experienced that, I thought, oh, yeah, this is just proof that it doesn't matter what technique you use. Like there's something deeper when it comes to productivity that it causes us all to fail. So failure. So let's talk about some of the more common, maybe rarely talked about reasons why people experience productivity fails. And maybe some of these are more well known and appreciated more than I think. But when I talk with people about productivity, when I'm coaching them, or like working through any efficiency woes they have, the following reasons are usually at the heart of the reasons why they feel like they've failed. And the first one's probably the most obvious one, perfectionism in the form of procrastination or putting off getting started. And the second reason, closely related, if not the same thing, is overcomplicating the simple, which really makes it hard to get started. So an example of overcomplicating. So like I mentioned, we're a classic car family, and my son, who I just also mentioned, graduated 18 now, has become afflicted also with this classic car disease, meaning he must own one. So he did, in fact, buy a car like 2 weeks ago. And to make a long story short, he wants to park it indoors. And we do have garage space and we're willing to loan it to him. But this has created a decision point for my husband and I. We've been talking about finishing the inside of our garage for some time now with like salvaged barn steel and barnwood, which is we have an abundance of, but it's all inside on the floor where the car could actually go. So to finish the inside of the garage to my husband, maybe not me so much, but to my husband means to insulate it. And then that's going to require research on his part as to which method's the best, learning if he wants to do it and how, or deciding to pay someone. Plus, we have to buy all the materials to insulate. The solution to this problem just got a lot bigger and more expensive all of a sudden, which is probably why we've been procrastinating on starting it thus far, because the perfect solution, with or without an additional car to park indoors, is to do it the way we would like to do it. But there are also like quite a few other solutions available to solve this immediate issue, which is the need to park inside, which rearranging the materials to make better use of the space, well, we could do that. We're just not really feeling motivated to do it right now. So what did we do? Well, we moved one of our older vehicles outside to make space for my son's car, which still technically is a solution and probably the easiest one, but not popular for my husband, nor has it addressed the issue. It really just made another problem, which is when winter comes, if we don't have the situation resolved, there'll be a car sitting outside in the snow, and it's my husband's car, so he's going to have to clean it off to drive it, which he won't be pleased about. So like we solved a problem, created another problem. So hopefully that example kind of brought to light like how we can overcomplicate things as humans. Maybe that's something sounds like something you've done, or maybe you've been an accomplice in something similar. And sometimes like you don't even get to the point of doing anything. The conversation just stops. And that's where it ends, right? So it's a real thing. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but I like this model, and I know some of the people on this call probably knows this model because I know I've learned it with some of them. But I want to share it with you because it's really helped me with my focus and efficiency in like pretty much every way. So I hope you're able to apply some of it in your thinking going forward. The model is called the Knebben framework. So it sounds different than it's spelled, but like I said before, it's a sense-making framework. It's a way to think about things to help you be more efficient. The framework suggests that most, if not all, problems can be categorized into 4 buckets. And the first one is obvious. So this is where like standard operating procedures live. Most standard operating procedures can live here. Some people have trouble deciding what can be an SOP and what can't, but that's a discussion for another day. Professionally, an example of this is like how to record vacation time in your company's like HR system, right? Like the steps are clear. Personally, this might be something like, I don't know, brushing your teeth, I think is what comes to mind. Like there are clearly steps that have dependencies on each other, and they're pretty much the same each time, and you do it pretty much the same point each day. There's like hardly any variability with that. So that's obvious. The next bucket, chaotic. Depending on your role or maybe your personality for that matter, you may or may not find yourself much in this space. The easiest way I found to describe this bucket of problems is to liken it to those situations like that a first responder might encounter, like when they arrive at the scene of like a car accident or something. They rely upon decision making to assess a situation, and they apply their training to act. So this is like more of a reflex space and kind of an urgency type space than any of the other buckets. The next two buckets I'm going to talk about are going to seem like they're one and the same, but they aren't. And honestly, that's kind of why we're talking about this just in a discussion about productivity, because when we get these two buckets mixed up, that's where sometimes our trouble can begin. The third bucket is complicated. This is the world of known unknowns. Interesting, huh? Known unknowns. So basically, there are many steps in a process to get to the solution and complicated problems. But we know what all the steps are, and most of the time we know that. And this tends to work pretty well when you're working with things versus people. So when I say things, good examples of this I can think of are like building a bridge, maybe, or assembling an automobile. So those are big projects, lots of moving parts, lots of steps, backed by science and research, completed and validated by people who are way smarter than me. And at some point, the way to build a bridge or assemble a car was not known, but it became known. And then it went from complex, which is what we're going to talk about next, into this complicated bucket. So just a disclaimer here is that this isn't to say unexpected things don't happen in complicated problems, but when they do, there's usually sort of a way to address it. And when there isn't, that means your problem's moved into the complex space. And this one is really hard for two reasons. This is the bucket where you know you have a problem to solve or something to do, but there's so many things you can already see about it that you don't have an answer for. And you may not even actually know when you've been successful or are like finished, if that makes sense. And the second reason why this is really hard is because this is where all people problems reside. All people problems are here. Um, so complex problems have these kinds of characteristics. Like there's no amount of analysis up front that can be done that will solve it. The order of doing things is emergent and unknown. Like you have to start in order to know how to keep going. The best solution will emerge. And the only way to get there is to just, like I said, get going. Waiting to know the answer or the ending before starting means you'll never start. And that in and of itself is where complex problems often are failed. So cognitive bias comes into play here. So what you already know and what you think is going to happen. That might encourage you to take shortcuts to get to a solution. Like if you think something's obvious when it's really complex. So like you have to watch like your brain and what kinds of things it's telling you about the problem. Hindsight bias can also sabotage people here. When like once you know something, so like once the solution emerges when you're working on a complex problem, your brain can sometimes shame you into thinking, well, that was obvious when it never was, which can make you feel bad or frustrated that you didn't realize it sooner. But the spoiler alert on that is it was never there to see, and that's why hindsight bias it can be like a real bear. Um, some things that happen sometimes is that complex problems are sometimes treated like chaotic because they're not complicated or obvious, but the urgency is what makes them different. So chaotic versus complex. And so the example for this bucket that I have is parenting. Professional, like parenting involves people, right? So like there's no way to know how to do it, what's going to happen, any of that. So parenting is probably the prime example of a complex problem or a complex task. A professional example would be like any type of role where you design things or manage people. There's not one single way to handle every person in your life. Um, People are far from consistent in how they behave. So anytime you're dealing with a people matter, it's complex. It just is. So just know that you don't know. It's easier to accept that and move ahead with that in mind, especially when dealing with people problems. And just to kind of round this out, like our human tendency is, this is kind of a warning, I guess, our human tendency is to start with the obvious and then move to complicated and then move to the complex space, like when you're working through your to-do list. And the complex problems are where you need like the most energy and where a lot of problems kind of end up. So you have to be kind of aware of what kind of problem you have. And make sure one that you're not leaving all your complex problems to like the end of your to-do list, and also make sure you're trying to solve them appropriately. Like ideas on how to prioritize your lists can be like prioritizing by complexity versus quantity. Like pick something complex to work on above all others, like time box it so you're not spending endless hours on it, but see how much you can get done. Sometimes, or a lot of times, the impact of like doing one complex thing over multiple obvious things like can have a greater impact. And like all this to say just two things. When you're in a situation where you're trying to get started on a task or whatnot, it might behoove you to spend a little time thinking about what kind of problem you have, and that might save you some time in terms of knowing how to address it, how to approach it. And then also, like don't always solve for the easy things first. You can, and you can rack up a lot of wins in that way. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to lead to increased frustration and decreased motivation because the things you really need to do or the things you really want to do are just going to continue to be on your list. And we saw that in the poll a little bit. When people are saying like prioritization. So it's easy to get prioritization out of whack when you see something come in that's like, oh, that's easy, I'll just do that. But really what you're doing is multitasking or avoiding doing a complex thing. All right, let's keep getting through these failures as fast as we can. We don't want to talk about them any longer than we have to, but the fear of being wrong. So this is what I want you to hear about this. You failed. So what? So what you do next is important. But more importantly is being aware of the fact that you failed and knowing that you have a choice about what to do next. And a choice as to whether you allow your brain to talk down to you and push you even further away from thinking that you can accomplish what you want for anything in the future is a choice that you can make. You do not have to believe everything that you think. Don't treat yourself differently than you treat others in terms of kindness, grace, and respect. Give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Offer the same level of empathy to yourself as you would offer to others. I mean, in the same way that you don't get bonus points for perfection, you don't get a medal for being harder on yourself than anyone else would be. So the way to undermine this negative self-talk that is constantly going on in all of our brains is through curiosity. So be curious about what you're thinking and be honest about the facts. How do you do that? Well, let me try to walk you through that and some easy prompts maybe that we can help you use to get more curious with yourself. So I have a separate talk altogether that I do, which some of you might have also seen, called Change Your Story, Change Your Outcome. And it's a discussion I like to have, especially as a coach, that can help people like shed light on how they might be sabotaging themselves because of how they think about themselves, other people in their lives, the world itself, etc. And there are 4 ways we tend to think about things that keeps that keep the stories in our minds very powerful, but they're largely untrue, and they can sometimes run our lives, like rent space in our heads for free, if you will. I heard that phrase so long ago, and it's one of my favorites. Um, just briefly, we're going to talk about the four ways. So, interpretations. So, what's tricky about interpretations is that you might believe with all of your heart that what you're thinking or what you remember is true because you saw it with your own two eyes. But probably so did someone else. And they probably have a slightly different version than you. And while it's maybe only slightly different, it might vary in a very important way. And guess what? You're both right and you're both wrong. Great, huh? That's super awesome. Way to start second guessing yourself right away, right? But this is the kind of thing you have to get curious about. What are you interpreting versus what actually happened? Assumptions. So this guy makes it pretty easy for you to convince yourself to never try something for a second time, especially if you failed or not necessarily succeeded the first time. Assumptions are dangerous because they're usually like sweeping and general. To always think about you should always think about something specifically and the reasons why something maybe didn't go as planned in that specific situation. You might be able to point to something that you would change the next time, and it might make all the difference in the world the next time. But using sweeping, general, broad judgments of why maybe things didn't go right is really not all that helpful. So my point is, in this world, you just never know what's going to happen. So don't let your brain tell you what's going to happen. Just go out and find out for yourself. Go do. Limiting beliefs. Now, this is something you learned or observed at some point in your life, and when that happened, your views on things changed. It's typically related to a stereotype that someone in your past helped you build about yourself, probably with or without you even knowing it. Um, Maybe because of how you grew up, you always believed that it was your job to do the laundry. Or maybe you believed it isn't your job to do the laundry. Like either way, what you believe drives how you behave. So you can change these things about yourself, but you have to be aware of them and know that they might not be serving you, aka they're limiting you in some way. And you have to be able to ask yourself why you believe that and what it's costing you. So maybe because you believe it's your job to do the laundry and you've decided Saturday mornings are when you do the laundry, because that's when it's always been done, you don't regularly or ever get coffee with your friends because that's when your friends go to coffee. But if you decided you wanted to start going to coffee and you actually decide to do laundry at a different time during the week, and if your goal is to be more active with your friends, now you can see how changing this belief about when you do laundry gets in the way of your goal. Like it's a completely oversimplified example, but hopefully it illustrates how sometimes you can limit your opportunities by settling into what you've always believed. Once you become aware of it, you can question it and hopefully figure out a way to work out of it. An inner voice is the one that usually pops in to say hello when you're on the threshold of doing something new, something bigger than you've done before, or even when you're doing something like already that you didn't think you could. It's out there to point out your flaws and remind you of how you've maybe gotten a little too big for your britches, if you know what I mean. So from a productivity standpoint, your inner voice is the one saying like, what were you thinking? Or why on earth did you think you could tackle such a big task? I'm not surprised you failed, and you will again and again, because let's face it, you're just not that smart. Anyone guilty of listening to self-talk that sounds like this? No, yeah. I have, and I do. So what do we do? Well, I have these four questions that help people work on their awareness. And again, now time for you to reflect. So I'm personally a fan of these coaching style questions. They usually help me kind of get out of a mental trap when I feel myself swirling the drain or mulling over the same situation again and again. I call a timeout and I ask myself some or all of these questions. And that is not a lie. I ask myself these questions all the time. So what is another story you could tell yourself about this? How may other people see this? What is a more positive way to view what happened? And my all-time favorite is is what you believe helpful or not helpful in this situation? So those are just 4 prompts that you can use to kind of break that mental trap that you might be in, and get that self-talk out of your head. Um, Next item of failure, looking for the wrong signs. So this speaks to hypothesis testing, which I'm sure probably you guys remember from your days in school. But basically, I think that the error with hypothesis testing is it's always saying, we're always thinking like, okay, how will I know when this is successful? How will I know when this is successful? And that usually happens at the end. What I'm challenging you to do here is to be on the lookout for signs that tell you that something isn't going right. So think differently about your outcomes. So I'm not telling you to be negative Nellies or anything like that, but when you're going to start something, like instead of saying, when this happens, I'll know I'm successful, you can do that. But I would also recommend that you say, and if this, or this happens, then I know I need to change course, or I know something isn't going the way that I intended it to go. So this helps us all to not continue to throw more of our time and energy and effort into something that isn't really going to result in success. And so by thinking about what you could be watching for that is a failure versus waiting to see success, like you've now opened your cognitive bias to be looking for things that are failing, right? Instead of just looking for things that are success. Because if you're only focused on success, things could be falling apart all around you and you may not even know because you're so focused on looking for that one validation of success. Mistaking activity for progress. So this one's not a new concept. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think we're only going to talk about it a little bit. But one of my all-time favorite movies, and probably one of yours as well, is this guy right here. And one of my favorite lines from the movie is something I want to use to demonstrate activity over, or progress over activity.
Worked really hard, Grandma. So do washing machines.
Oh my God, I just love that. So who better than your family, or even better, your in-laws, to tell you how they really feel about your efforts, right? In essence, that is a gift that your in-laws or other loving critics in your life can give you. They can see when you're just busy doing and not really achieving the outcomes you set out for. And it can happen for a multitude of reasons, and a lot of those we've already talked about. But again, some of the things you can do is really take a look at your to-do list and make sure that you're solving meaningful problems. You're looking at things that are really generating outcomes. And if you find that you're spending a lot of time and you're very busy, but you're not really, you're maybe starting more than you're finishing is a term that I like to use, then you might want to determine if maybe you're mistaking your activity for progress. So one thing to think about is stories like refining your to-do list, and like even just crossing things off your list that don't ever seem to make it to the top. Sometimes you can make them smaller and that helps you get things to the top, but sometimes things just need to be removed off of your list. And as humans, we hate to lose things, even just crossing things off of a list that we never did. But if you're never going to do them, what's the point of carrying them around? Because not doing them is essentially like they don't exist. There's really no difference. So one thing you can do is get comfortable with getting rid of irrelevant or non-essential things off your list so that you're not tempted to do those things in place of things that really matter. And the last one for failure, giving into resistance. And this one's hard because human nature wants to evaluate resistance as bad. Like turn around, go back, don't proceed, but is that really what it's telling us? So when I talk about resistance and changing a habit, such as like productivity, what we're talking about is changing a version of ourselves that is not currently doing what we want it to do. So it's change, right? And change is hard. Even good changes, like making ourselves more productive, is hard. So I have a rubber band here. Change is a lot like a rubber band or an elastic. The lady that taught me this was Canadian, so she always called it an elastic. But like when you're not asking anything of a rubber band, it's just laying on your desk. It's nice and relaxed. You can put it into whatever shape you want it to. There's no risk of it snapping or breaking until you start pulling on it, right? You're asking it to do something that it hasn't been doing. Now, can it still stretch and bend? Yeah, obviously, right? Absolutely. That's what it's made to do. But what else do you notice about when it's stretched, right? It's tight. It's a little harder to make it into any shape if you want to, and there's a risk of it snapping or breaking. So what else is it doing? It's constantly trying to go back to its relaxed state, the one where you're not asking it to do anything other than lay there. We are rubber bands. We act exactly the same. When we're being asked to change by ourselves or someone else, we get real tight. We might snap, like we could break. But we have something else in common with this rubber band, which is after a while, like after you're using it in a new way, like you put it around a stack of documents, or like it's in your hair in a ponytail, or like it's holding something together, like it grows to take care of its job. And sometimes the rubber band can even get loose and it might need like another twist to wrap around and remain effective. And sometimes they break or dry out. Absolutely. And that's probably when it's time for a new rubber band, like a refresh of habits, or maybe some reflection to sort out, like, what job is this rubber band even doing? And do I even need to like do that anymore? So an example of resistance is like when you experience like a scheduling conflict or like a snafu, I guess, something that interrupts or blows up your plans. And this is really a great place to pause and think about the resistance you're feeling. Like, what is it telling you? The good news is you can still salvage parts of your plans most of the time. Um, not that long ago, I read about if-then plans. Like some days are just going to be harder than others. So if you think about the roadblocks that are most likely to arise and create a plan to address it, then like not all is lost, right? So like if I come home from work and I'm like, ugh, too tired to do my exercising after work, but I'm still going to take a 10-minute walk after dinner. Like that is not exactly what you had in mind, but you're still getting some exercise. So don't give in or go back on things you really want. Treat yourself with grace and compassion and do as much of it as you can. And that's our takeaway number 4. Bottom line, sometimes resistance is telling you the wrong thing, right? So you have to be curious about what the resistance is telling you. Like, if you're feeling resistance, you have to ask yourself, like, what's the risk here? Like, what is this resistance all about? Like, it might be trying to keep you safe, but it also might just be telling you, like, hey, you're pretty tight. You might want to just go back to the way you were. And that's not what we want. So finally, Agile. What is Agile's secret sauce? Well, it's pretty simple. Do less, achieve more, faster, right? Oh my gosh, you're probably like, we waited this long for this. Yeah. Because you want outcomes, right? At the end of the day, we're all after outcomes. We want to be finishing more than we're starting. We want to be enjoying all the benefits of our completions, not just resting from our toils. So let's just talk about Agile real quick. So their primary 2 tenets of Agile: simplicity and delivering something early and often that can be used. So learning about Agile, there's a pretty well-known statistic out there that says, things that get designed and deployed like in a waterfall format, where like basically you decide what you're going to build up front and you put your head down and you build it all. And then you show up at the end with it all done and everyone starts using it, right? There is some pretty significant research out there that says there's a large percentage of features. Let's just use computer software, for example, right? There's a large percentage of features that do not get used when you do work like that. When you like come up with a big set of scope, put your head down and do it, release it, and people start using it. Does anyone know what that number is? Like, what is the percentage of features, 0 to 100, that do not get used on average when you handle a project like that? You can throw it in the chat if you have a guess. Maybe everyone's scared to guess. 65, 50. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, some brave ones out there. 90%. I love it. Yeah. Okay. Somewhere between 60 and 80% of features that get developed for any project computer software, your deck project, whatever. When you design it up front and you don't take time to evaluate it in the middle or ask people who are going to be using it what they think, somewhere between 60 and 80% of the features that you put work into, developed and deployed, never get used. That's awful. Like, that feels terrible to me. Makes me sick to my stomach. How much effort, time, and money has gone into something that no one's ever going to use? Leadership tends to use this number, or tends to like want to misquote Agile when it comes to efficiency gains. Like, they're saying like, well, we could work faster. Like, there's no working faster. The faster part comes from doing less, not developing features and components that no one else will use and finding that out before it's all built. That's where the efficiencies come from. So, like, again, nothing's worse than throwing good money after bad. And in the spirit of integrity, this is not to be confused with laziness or giving up. This is about like doing what's smart. So, how do you decide what not to do? Well, here's some more questions you can ask yourself, probably over and over. What needs to be done? Why am I doing it? How can I make iterative progress? And how will I know when to stop? And again, I hinted at this a little earlier, but won't this look like I'm taking a shortcut or being lazy? And the answer is no, because remember, 60 to 80% of all features that get developed when you like don't take time to get feedback or don't take time to reflect never get used. So that's the takeaway here. There's no style points awarded for doing more than is needed or requested. Like, don't throw additional time, money, or effort away on overdeveloping a solution that already accomplishes the goal. So, I mean, if you simply can't help yourself, like, then you should definitely ask. Like, ask the person who's requesting it. If you are thinking of adding something to a project, like, ask, would this be helpful? Ask yourself for sure, if you're the requester, or if you're not the requester, but you're not necessarily comfortable asking them, like, is this helpful and why? And if you don't have time, for sure, then do not add the scope. Like, speaking from experience, I've spent many hours at 2 a.m. in this office, like living out the punishment of trying to complete a project or task at the 11th hour because I added more than what was asked. Now I'm trying to do the thing that was actually asked before I started adding all my fanciness, and like, it's just a real productivity killer, and it kills you. Like, it kills your spirit. So you will get satisfaction and accomplishment of finishing even small parts of your project, and so will those that you do it for. So don't be afraid to share your progress with them also. You might even get some good feedback that'll help you know what to do next. And these small wins are hints of progress, and they help you maintain your motivation. Changing requirements, even if late in the project. So this isn't to say you should swallow every change that comes by either your brain or other people's thoughts, but it's worth hearing about. So, changing requirements is basically saying, like, yeah, you might have to do some rework. Yeah, you might have to change directions and stop and replan. But at least changing a requirement is a gift. It's feedback. It's telling you, no, here's what would be more helpful. Humans are historically poor at visualizing things. So as soon as you can show them kind of a framework or a picture of what you're intending to build or do, yourself included, the sooner you'll get a reaction or a response. And with that time, you can save energy. So we're running a little long on time here, so I'm just going to go. Some of this is kind of redundant. So remember, you might feel like changing requirements is resistance, but it doesn't always mean something isn't working. Just stay curious. Two more things. This one's really important for you to grasp. Because we often use the following motivators to stay connected to a project, which is what these two principles are talking about. Build projects around motivation, and reflect on them. So some engagement killers are emotional pressure. So when you tie something to something that you're doing for someone else, or there's a social consequence for it. So if your spouse says, I really wish you would do this, but you have no interest in doing that, you could probably do it for a little while, but not forever. Economic pressure, like allowances, for example, I guess I'm in the kid mode right now. So attaching financial gains and losses might work over the short term, but it's not going to create a lasting habit. And inertia. So some people have a belief that nothing's ever going to change, and any setback is validation for that, but that's really not all that helpful, and it's actually not true. So feeling this way and doing things in this way is normal, but I'm going to encourage you to actually look at doing things that build engagement, like connecting with a purpose, relatedness, connection, growing your mastery or competency around something, and even just making daily progress are things that build engagement between you and whatever it is you're trying to do. Intrinsics are always greater than incentives. So people who are able to motivate themselves intrinsically are virtually unstoppable. And how does someone do that? Well, it takes practice and awareness and reflection. So one more thing to consider is that delegation doesn't need to feel like dumping. So if there are things that need to be done, but you simply don't connect to them or they don't energize you, these are great things to delegate, or at least co-opt with someone who does connect with the task. Just because you don't like what that task is, doesn't mean that it's not someone else's jam. Again, we have to be careful not to generalize, because just because I don't like doing a certain task doesn't mean that everyone dreads it. Everyone's unique. So get curious about what people like, and you might just find out that someone in your midst loves to do something you hate and would welcome the opportunity to do the thing you loathe. And lastly, agile principles. So you want to build on something that's sustainable. You don't want to set yourself up to fail by operating in a manner that you cannot or do not want to maintain. A lot of failure comes from this sort of fallacy that you can change fundamentally who you are. It takes time for these things to stick. So just because something's failing right now doesn't mean that it's going to be that way forever. But some examples of when I've seen this fail before is like schedule rigidity. Like if you say, I'm going to get up every morning at 5 o'clock and work out, but you're not a morning person, that's probably not going to work. Food and diet choices. Like if you're eating things to lose weight or to maintain weight, but you don't actually like them, you're probably not going to stick with them long term. And anything that lacks enjoyment or is a drain of energy for you is definitely going to be a hindrance to you maintaining any sort of habit that you want to achieve. And I know we're getting close to running out of time, so we're right here at reflection. And with that, I want to just throw up here the takeaways that I put up here on the screen. I know we covered a lot of information today. And so I know someone asked if this was going to be sent out, and it's true, these slides will be sent out as well as the recording. But just in recap, these are the takeaways that we talked about today. So maybe a little less on the agile side of things, but using those agile principles to think about ways to do things differently than maybe you have in the past. So now that I've thrown a lot at you, probably wasn't all necessary or rational to think that you could bring all that in. Sometimes when I come to these types of conversations, I walk away with overwhelmed and not really sure what to do or where to start. But my recommendation is to take one or two of the ideas presented and commit to implementing them, or at least just trying them on, and give them more than a try or two. And remember, you are the rubber band, right? When I was taught this concept, we were all given one to wear on our wrists as a reminder, and you bet your boots I did for a really long time, and it helped me. So feel free to do the same if that would help remind you to be just like a rubber band. And if you're still unsure how to apply any or all of this, like just start with curiosity. Keep mental, or even better, written track of your progress. Like, what did you complete and why? And how did it make you feel? What didn't you do and why? And how did it make you feel? Like, be specific, not general, remember. And this, because being general is just going to lead to negative judgment of yourself, and that's just not helpful. So using constant reflection, not dwelling, to inspect and improve and accept those changes and requirements gracefully will help you to achieve the results you want and not to beat yourself up over things that have changed or didn't come out the way you wanted them to. Because when it comes to the journey of changing yourself for the better, you definitely should not always believe what you think. So remember, it's simple, right? Do less, achieve more, faster, and take back your time to go do something that you've really been missing, something that's fun and that you really enjoy. And thanks to Kirkwood and all of you for spending your time with me today. And I hope the rest of your day and week are amazing. And here's my information if any of you would like to contact further. Thanks.